Hello, welcome to another video by Enterprise Software Solutions, your number one software dude. Today we're going to finish out our four-part series on getting up and running with Office 365. Today we're going to talk about using conditional access to set up MFA for your environment. Once again, we're going to start out in the Azure Active Directory Admin Center. And we're going to go up to All Services, open up Conditional Access, and then you're going to see Conditional Access Policies. So the point of conditional access is to actually truly create policies that manage authentications based upon their risks. Not all authentication into your environment is equal, right? There are different risks to authenticating to the SharePoint site in your office than there are risks authenticating to Office 365 admin portal in a cafe, right? So conditional access gives you the ability to treat authentications on different risk levels appropriately to it, so you can create the correct amount of access or restrictions as needed per application, per setting. So what we're going to talk about first real quick is named locations. So you can configure different settings for your office for trusted IP addresses, locations on countries, things like that, where right, if you have workers that work in a specific country on occasion, you want them to always MFA, you can kind of do that. You want to trust the IPs of your office so that people don't have to MFA, you can do that. From the demo we set up, free trial, you don't have access to the licensing needed for conditional access. You need at least an AADP1. You can also go ahead and enable a AADP1 license from the portal. I'm going to pull up another environment that I've already set up. So we'll go ahead and create a new policy. And your policies are basically set up out of, do you want to assign to users or groups or administrations? Do you want specific applications? What are the conditions you want to apply? And then how are you going to manage that access control? And then finally, the policy it's enabled. Is it you going to report on it only? Do you want it turned on or do you want it turned off? By default, all policies are created in report only mode. That way you can deploy them, look at the logs, and then find out when these may have been triggered before you actually turn them on and potentially have a breaking change or have negative customer experience or anything like that. So it's always recommended when you enable your first policy, have it in report only to manage and check. Also, you should have a break glass in case of emergency account that is not a part of any conditional access policy, so that you can always have a way to get back in case of an outage or an issue or something like that. Very long password should be stored correctly, should not be used as an everyday function of any kind of job, and anytime it is used, the password should be rotated, kind of thing. But for this, we'll just go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and select a directory role. I'm going to select my global administrator. As we talked about in the other video, this is the most important account you have in your environment. So anyone that has global administrator rights, you could set different configuration risks here. So I'm going to say this is a high user risk. I'm going to say this is a high sign-in risk. We're going to allow access. We're going to grant access, but we're going to require multi-factor authentication. We're going to require the device to be compliant. So this is a functionality of MDM and Intune. All right, is that you can make sure that like this is a corporate-owned device, that it has security updates and policies and additional things like that. We're going to require all of the controls. All right, select. All right, and do note there are differences on other apps, but we're going to go ahead and just exclude those for now. And then we now have a conditional access policy that only applies to people with global admin rights, where they always have to provide MFA and be on a improved device, right? Because by default, it's only enabled, so I can go ahead and turn this on or save it. Go ahead and delete it here. In addition to that, say I want all users that are signing into AWS. So they're using an IDP environment, right? I can go ahead and do the same thing. Grant, require multi-action. I don't care if the device is compliant. We'll just make sure that MFA create that device. And then these will go through and track and manage those configurations as needed. Okay. Finally, as users are going through and signing into these devices and you want to manage and track those, you can look go into the sign-in logs, pick a user, look at the policies, and you'll see what policies were applied and if they were interrupted or not, and you could use it as a troubleshooting step. So this is kind of how you back that up. The final thing I'll say about this is all of this is nice and fancy and works really well, but you do need to ensure that you have no legacy authentication enabled in your environment. That's kind of outside the scope of this video, but if legacy authentication is still enabled and those old protocols are still being used, an attacker can use that basically as a backdoor, because conditional access only applies to mod and auth. So go through your environment and do those checks. Make sure you're in a position to be able to turn off legacy off, turn it off so that this is all forced through mod authentication, and conditional access can go ahead and do all of its work. Right. These are also things you should set up slowly, testing them, auditing them, making sure they're working correctly in the way you want. You don't want to lock out a large chunk of your users because there's a lot of power here, right? So devices, locations, different applications, different sign-in risks, different functionality there. So there's a lot of nerd knobs to tune in these, but there's a lot of value to go in here and put this in here and treat authentications to the right type of risk they are. So if you found that video useful, enjoyed our 4-part series on getting up started with Office 365 in your environment. Thank you for watching, and don't forget that Enterprise Software Solutions is your #1 software dudes.